After a few weeks of break, I would like to again start my series. So today we are going to talk about one of the important concepts of Vedic astrology, which is debilitated Jupiter. So Jupiter in Neecha. So debilitated Jupiter uh, has a different meaning for different ascendants. So we need to understand like for which ascendants Jupiter is benefic and for which ascendants Jupiter is malefic. So coming to Jupiter, so Jupiter is a Karaka. He is significator for many important things in life. So Jupiter is for father, spiritual energy, higher learning, higher education, Karaka for children. He's Karaka for contentment, peace. He's Karaka for home. And Jupiter is also Karaka for teachers, guides, mentors, education. And in a woman's chart, Jupiter plays prominent role in the sense Jupiter is Karaka for marriage as well as children. So a debilitated Jupiter in a woman's horoscope has a different meaning than a debilitated Jupiter in a man's chart. So considering for which ascendants Jupiter is benefic, for which ascendants Jupiter is malefic. So basically for Sagittarius, Aries, Cancer, Leo, for these ascendants Jupiter is benefic. Why? Because Jupiter shares a godly relationship with these friends Mars, Sun, and Moon. So these three planets are friends to Jupiter. That's why Jupiter becomes benefic for these ascendants. So if Jupiter is benefic for a particular individual and he is debilitated, then what's the meaning? What's the interpretation? So basically Jupiter is a must energy every individual has to possess up to certain extent. So if the power of Jupiter is kind of low in any chart, so then it implies that some of the Karakas, significations of Jupiter may be compromised unless the Jupiter attains high score in Shatbala. So it's not necessarily that Jupiter becomes a malefic, that a debilitated Jupiter becomes a malefic. It is likely that Jupiter can attain very good score in Shatbala and he can even perform well, can make an individual successful. For example, Jupiter debilitated and he has attained Neecha, then it makes a person successful in the area respect to the sign the Jupiter is positioned relative to the ascendant. So irrespective of whether Jupiter is functional malefic or functional benefic, if Jupiter is debilitated, some of the Karakas may not do well in certain areas of life for an individual. So it is important that at least in divisional charts Jupiter is in good strength, and in Shatbala also Jupiter is having at least average strength for a person to be successful in all walks of life. So a debilitated Jupiter could bring issues related to education, as Jupiter is Vidyakaraka. The relationship with father may not be good, and this particular person who has a debilitated Jupiter may face a long running health issues, especially related to heart blood flow. And debilitated Jupiter in woman's chart can bring issues with husband or delay her marriage, and also it's not good for children. So unless Jupiter attains good score in Shatbala. So Jupiter plays key role for any individual. So considering for Saturn, Venus and Mercury ascendants, Jupiter becomes small fig. So here the debilitated Jupiter has a totally different meaning and different interpretation. So a debilitated Jupiter for these ascendants, for whom the ascendant lord is enemy to Jupiter, it may be auspicious. But as I mentioned, Jupiter should at least attain average score in Shadbala. Then only things can work for people who have Jupiter in debilitation. And also, Jupiter in debilitated can make a person a prominent priest in a Shivalaya. Because debilitated Jupiter makes a person go through some kind of transformation and heal others. So that's what the Pandits do in Shivalaya. They do every day. They take all the things from people and they worship, do perform Abhisheka for the well-being of mankind. So a person who has debilitated Jupiter, the best remedy is to do Sivarchana, the puja of Lord Shiva. That is one thing. Another thing is because Jupiter owns natural 12th house from Aries, from natural zodiac. So 12th house is house of basically sacrifice and charity. So more sacrifice and charity these people involve, like they have more auspicious Jupiter, and it protects them from the Neecha dignity of Jupiter. People who do sacrifice for the sake of unprivileged poor people, or who honor poor Brahmins. So these people may not suffer extremely. So the negative and the malefic nature of Jupiter could be suppressed by performing Abhisheka to Shiva. So especially for Venus, Mercury, and Saturn ascendants, that is Capricorn ascendant, Aquarius ascendant, Gemini ascendant, Virgo ascendant, and Taurus ascendant, and Libra ascendants. For them, Jupiter is a functional malefic because it basically it blocks the ascendant's energy if Jupiter is not well positioned. So it is important that for these ascendants, Jupiter is not exalted, either in Rashi chart or in Navamsa chart or in any divisional charts. So because if the enemy gets exalted, what happens? He won't cooperate with the ascendant. And for Sagittarius, Cancer, Aries, Scorpio, Pisces ascendants, Jupiter is a functional benefic, and especially for Sagittarius and Pisces, Jupiter is basically Lagna Lord. Basically, he owns these two houses, and Sagittarius is a Mula Trikona. For a Sagittarius ascendant, if Jupiter is debilitated, in one way it is a blessing. In other way, it could bring some issues related to health, relationship with father, and higher education. And with respect to upholding dharma and maintaining, keeping up the morals, this person may fail. A person who has a debilitated Jupiter. The blessing, the only one blessing that they have for both Sagittarius and Pisces ascendants, a debilitated Jupiter can suppress, nullify the Kendradipatya dosha of Jupiter. Jupiter being owner of two Kendras. So Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. So usually I look at it is a debilitated Jupiter is as good as Saturn, because Jupiter is a planet of higher divine wisdom. He is a preacher, teacher, worshipper, nourisher. So a debilitated Jupiter means the Jupiter is losing all these qualities. So a highly divinely person becomes an ordinary person, and he has to come down and break the rocks, pass through all the hardships. Now It has become more or less like a Saturn. That's why the Jupiter is positioned in Capricorn. A debilitated Jupiter is in basically in Capricorn. It means a person who lost all his charm, the divine charm, has to act like a Saturn. So Saturn is in one house. It means because Capricorn is one of the prominent Kendras, the highest of Kendras. So the Kendras always talk about the actions an individual that he takes up on the social side of life. So Jupiter is not like a Mars. He's not action. Jupiter is guidance. Jupiter is divine wisdom. So if Jupiter loses these qualities, then he's not guru, he's not a teacher, he's not a priest. He has to work like a labor. He becomes a certain kind of personality. So friends, this is my analysis about Jupiter debilitated in horoscope. If you like the video, please click on the like button and also subscribe to my video. Thank you very much.